Numbers chapter 8. The Lord said to Moses, "Tell Aaron to put the 7 lamps on the lampstand so they shine toward the front." Aaron obeyed and placed the lamps as he was told. The lampstand was made of hammered gold from its base to the decorative flowers on top, exactly like the pattern the Lord had described to Moses. The Lord said to Moses, "The Levites must be acceptable to me before they begin working at the sacred tent. So separate them from the rest of the Israelites and sprinkle them with the water that washes away their sins. Then have them shave their entire bodies and wash their clothes. They are to bring a bull and its proper grain sacrifice of flour mixed with olive oil. And they must bring a second bull as a sacrifice for sin. Then you, Moses, will call together all the people of Israel and send the Levites to my sacred tent, where the people will place their hands on them. Aaron will present the Levites to me as a gift from the people, so that the Levites will do my work. After this, the Levites are to place their hands on the heads of the bulls. Sacrifice one of the bulls for the forgiveness of sin, and the other to make sure that I am pleased. Then the Levites will be acceptable to me. They will stand at my altar in front of Aaron and his sons, who will dedicate the Levites to me. This ceremony will show that the Levites are different from the other Israelites and belong to me in a special way. After they have been made acceptable and have been dedicated, they will be allowed to work at my sacred tent. They are mine and will take the place of the firstborn Israelite sons. When I killed the oldest sons of the Egyptians, I decided that the firstborn sons in each Israelite family would be mine, as well as every firstborn male from their flocks and herds. But now I have chosen these Levites as substitutes for the firstborn sons, and I have given them as gifts to Aaron and his sons to serve at the sacred tent. I will hold them responsible for what happens to anyone who gets too close to the sacred tent. Moses, Aaron, and the other Israelites made sure that the Levites did everything the Lord had commanded. The Levites sprinkled themselves with the water of forgiveness and washed their clothes. Then Aaron brought them to the altar and offered sacrifices to forgive their sins and make them acceptable to the Lord. After this, the Levites worked at the sacred tent as assistants to Aaron and his sons, just as the Lord had commanded. The Lord also told Moses, "Levites who are between the ages of 25 and 50 must work at my sacred tent. But once they turn 50, they must retire. Levites who are between the ages of 25 and 50 must work at my sacred tent. But once they turn 50, they must retire. They may help the other Levites in their duties, but they must no longer be responsible for any work themselves. Remember this when you assign their duties." Numbers chapter 4. The Lord told Moses and Aaron, "Find out how many men between the ages of 30 and 50 are in the 4 Levite clans of Kohath. Count only those who are able to work at the sacred tent. The Kohathites will be responsible for carrying the sacred objects used in worship at the sacred tent. When the Israelites are ready to move their camp, Aaron and his sons will enter the tent and take down the curtain that separates the sacred chest from the rest of the tent. They will cover the chest with this curtain, and then with a piece of fine leather, and cover it all with a solid blue cloth. After this they will put the carrying poles in place. Next, Aaron and his sons will use another blue cloth to cover the table for the sacred bread. On the cloth they will place the dishes, the bowls for incense, the cups, the jugs for wine, as well as the bread itself. They are to cover all of this with a bright red cloth, and then with a piece of fine leather, before putting the carrying poles in place. With another blue cloth they will cover the lampstand, along with the lamps, the lamp snuffers, the fire pans, and the jars of oil for the lamps. All of this will then be covered with a piece of fine leather and placed on a carrying frame. The gold incense altar is to be covered with a blue cloth, and then with a piece of fine leather, before its carrying poles are put in place. Next, Aaron and his sons will take blue cloth and wrap all the objects used in worship at the sacred tent. These will need to be covered with a piece of fine leather, then placed on a carrying frame. They are to remove the ashes from the bronze altar and cover it with a purple cloth. On that cloth will be placed the utensils used at the altar, including the fire pans, the meat forks, the shovels, and the sprinkling bowls. All of this will then be covered with a piece of fine leather, before the carrying poles are put in place. When the camp is ready to be moved, the Kohathites will be responsible for carrying the sacred objects and the furnishings of the sacred tent. But Aaron and his sons must have already covered those things so the Kohathites won't touch them and die. Eleazar son of Aaron the priest will be in charge of the oil for the lamps, the sweet-smelling incense, the grain for the sacrifices, and the olive oil used for dedications and ordinations. Eleazar is responsible for seeing that the sacred tent, its furnishings, and the sacred objects are taken care of. The Kohathites must not go near or even look at the sacred objects until Aaron and his sons have covered those objects. If they do, their entire clan will be wiped out. So make sure that Aaron and his sons go into the tent with them and tell them what to carry. Said to Moses, "Find out how many men between the ages of 30 and 50 are in the 2 Levite clans of Gershon. Count only those who are able to work at the sacred tent." The Gershonites will be responsible for carrying the curtains of the sacred tent, its 2 outer coverings, the curtain for the entrance to the tent, the curtains hanging around the courtyard of the tent, and the curtain and ropes for the entrance to the courtyard. The Gershonites are to do whatever needs to be done to take care of these things, and they will carry them wherever Aaron and his sons tell them to. These are the duties of the Gershonites at the sacred tent, and Ithamar son of Aaron will make sure they do their work. Said Moses, "Find out how many men between 30 and 50 are in the 2 Levite clans of Merari, but count only those who are able to work at the sacred tent." The Merarites will be responsible for carrying the frames of the tent and its other pieces, including the bars, the posts, and the stands, as well as the posts that support the courtyard, together with their stands, tent pegs, and ropes. The Merarites are to be told exactly what objects they are to carry, and Ithamar son of Aaron will make sure they do their work. Moses, Aaron, and the other Israelite leaders obeyed and counted the Levi tribe by families and clans, to find out how many men there were between the ages of 30 and 50 who could work at the sacred tent. There were 2,750 Kohathites, 2,630 Gershonites, and 3,200 Merarites, making a total of 8,580. Then they were all assigned their duties. Leviticus chapter 9. 8 days later Moses called together Aaron, his sons, and Israel's leaders. Then he said to Aaron, "Find a young bull and a ram that have nothing wrong with them. Offer the bull to the Lord as a sacrifice for sin and the ram as a sacrifice to please him. Tell the people of Israel that they must offer sacrifices as well. They must offer a goat as a sacrifice for sin, and a bull and a ram as a sacrifice to please the Lord. The bull and the ram must be a year old and have nothing wrong with them. Then the people must offer a bull and a ram as a sacrifice to ask the Lord's blessing, and also a grain sacrifice mixed with oil. Do this, because the Lord will appear to you today." After the animals and the grain had been brought to the front of the sacred tent, and the people were standing there in the presence of the Lord, Moses said, "The Lord has ordered you to do this, so that he may appear to you in all of his glory. Aaron, step up to the altar and offer the sacrifice to please the Lord, then offer the sacrifices for the forgiveness of your sins and for the sins of the people, just as the Lord has commanded." Aaron stepped up to the altar and killed the bull that was to be the sacrifice for his sins. His sons brought him the blood. He dipped a finger in it, smeared some on the 4 corners of the bronze altar, and poured out the rest at its foot. But he sent up in smoke the fat, the kidneys, and the lower part of the liver, just as the Lord had commanded Moses. Then Aaron burned the skin and the flesh outside the camp. After Aaron had killed the ram that was sacrificed to please the Lord, Aaron's sons brought him the blood, and he splattered it against all 4 sides of the altar. They brought him each piece of the animal, including the head, and he burned them all on the altar. He washed the insides and the hind legs and also sent them up in smoke. Next, Aaron sacrificed the goat for the sins of the people, as he had done with the sacrifice for his own sins. And so, he burned this sacrifice on the altar in the proper way. He also presented the grain sacrifice and burned a handful of the flour on the altar as part of the morning sacrifice. Finally, he killed the bull and the ram as a sacrifice to ask the Lord's blessing on the people. Aaron's sons brought him the blood, and he splattered it against the four sides of the altar. His sons placed all the fat, as well as the kidneys and the lower part of the liver on top of the choice ribs. Then Aaron burned the fat on the altar and lifted up the ribs and the right hind leg to show that these were dedicated to the Lord. This was done just as the Lord had instructed Moses. Aaron held out his hand and gave the people his blessing, before coming down from the bronze altar where he had offered the sacrifices. He and Moses went into the sacred tent, and when they came out, they gave the people their blessing. Then the Lord appeared to the people in all of his glory. The Lord sent fiery flames that burned up everything on the altar, and when everyone saw this, they shouted and fell to their knees to worship the Lord.